right? So a couple of days ago, the CS of Interior, Fred Matiang'i, has proposed a few things. And he said that Committee Maximum Prison and the Langata Women's Prison should be moved out of Nairobi. He suggested that they should be moved to Kitale or Bomet. Places.
I wonder why you picked on those. Places that have vast land.
Exactly.
Okay.
Places that have vast pieces of land. The city is already too congested. Plus, there's need for expanded infrastructure in Nairobi.
Right.
And there are vast areas of land that these facilities, these centers, rehabilitation centers in the name of prisons take up.
Right.
That could be easily used for other things. He said Industrial Area Prison, Nairobi West Prison, and Shimolatewa should also be transferred from the respective cities. Why should we have prisons in the middle of the city when we could use that prime land to develop and increase amenities of the capital? He was speaking at the launch of the National Lands Commission Strategic Plan last Friday in Nairobi. Committee sits in the middle of its own 1,200 acres, estates which lie fallow and untended. Langata sits on about 50 acres after the rest was grabbed. The Commission developed the plan to ensure the implementation of its mandate is guided as spelt out in the Constitution, statutory and policy provisions. The Commission targets 20 billion shillings to make the plan operational. He says, well, one of the ways we can do this plan is wonderful. Right? So looking at ways in which you can actually mop up unused areas of land and actually now begin to develop the infrastructure of certain cities, whether it's Mombasa, whether it's Nairobi. But we have huge chunks of land.
1,200 acres.
Committee alone. Yes.
Langata Women, 50 acres.
Those are just the two. We've not been given the demographics of industrial area or Shimolatewa, right? And he said, why are we going very far and,
well, we're thinking so hard, and yet we have
these options.
It makes sense.
The viability of it, when you think about it, you're like, okay, hold on. Why then do rehabilitation centers actually need to be in the city?
Okay. This one, if we juxtapose it as city, we would say, with the conversation about let's move the Nairobi National Park, for me, don't touch. Committee, move committee. I say yes. I can see what you mean. Where we have reached in Nairobi is a place where we are not even able to expand anymore. Look at the deployment after the, the reclassification of some certain estates. Upper Hill, look at Kilimani, Kileleshwa. Those are now taking up more and more housing units. But the road is not even... You cannot expand the road unless the National Land Commission goes and starts buying land to put up a road. We are getting more and more congested. Maybe we should move ourselves out of here. But let's bring in our guest who will help us understand this matter. Dr. Mwenda Makathimo is a former chairperson of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya. He is the Executive Director of Land Development and Governance Institute. He is a land governance expert. He's on the line with us this time. Good morning, Dr. Hari.
Good morning, Latif. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good to see you, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room.
All right, pleasure too.
So, Dr. Makathimo, there's a lot that has been said about land. You have been one of those people who've been participating in land reforms in the country for many years. We are looking at Nairobi and the congestion that Nairobi is experiencing, and it will continue to experience as it's expected that urbanization will continue growing. Then we have what the CS for Interior is proposing. Let's look at some of these underutilized pieces of land and see what options there would be. What would your reaction to that be?
Well, first of all, the principle that we need to bank our discussion on is the principle of highest and best use of land and resources. Now, it is true that land within Nairobi area has not been put to its highest and best use. What do we mean by highest and best? We mean that into use that is economically feasible, use that is physically possible, use that is environmentally sustainable, and use that is socially acceptable in the most optimal manner. So if we look at like Eastlands, the estates around the Eastlands, you find the single dwelling houses around the Bahati, Jerusalem, all those places have not been put to their highest and best use in terms of intensity. The space within which you would develop is upwards, and having a single dwelling unit, a bungalow, occupying all that space, and it's just made of bungalows, when you can do even 20, 30 floors above, that shows you that it is not even at 10% in terms of optimal use. And even very many other of the old estates. So therefore, in terms of vertical use of the land, and in terms of optimal land use, in Nairobi, we have not attained that. Not just Nairobi, countrywide. But we have to look at the suggestion coming from the Ministry of Interior within the context of land tenure. How is land owned in the country? Because that's where you begin. Land is either private, or it is public, or communal. Land in Nairobi is in two categories: public land and private land. There is no communal land or community land in Nairobi.
Yep.
So therefore, we have to look at the private land as it been put into highest and best use. Most of the private land, yes, but within the planning regulations. So we have to look at those who hold leases in Nairobi and have not developed those pieces of land where they have leases or even freeholds, where they have private land. Are there people who have property within Nairobi that is undeveloped? There are many, even at the town center, right opposite the court near Kencom. You have vacant parcel of land there.
Yep.
Right for the GPO, another vacant piece of land there. So you see quite a number of them that have not been put to their highest and best use. And you have to look at why. Are there development conditions that have not been fulfilled? Are there disputes? Is it lack of money? Or is it just people speculating with the land? That's the extent of the private land. On the part of public land, the guiding line or the guiding thing on public land is what purpose was the land acquired for? So in terms of optimal, you don't look at just public land in just in terms of economics, saying that this would be a nice place to put up say a commercial complex. For instance, when you look at the stadium, you cannot say this is land that is gone into waste. Let's put up a commercial stadium. There is value, there is social value that you have to look at. When you look at Uhuru Park and the City Park, you can't say this is idle land, let's put infrastructure here. It has social environmental value. Now, the question with prisons that we have to ask ourselves is, what was the public purpose behind the prisons being there? Then we review that purpose and see the optimality of that prison. Because when the prisons were set up, they looked at the issue of settlement. There are many people within the city, and there is bound to be crimes or offenses or people jailed. And then the courts are also within the city. So they looked at the complementarity. You have people here who will need to be taken to correctional facilities, and you also have courts that relate very closely with the institution of the prison. So you cannot take a prison to a place far away from the court, because you notice that the people in remand are always brought to court regularly, every other day. So that complementarity has to be there. If you have to review the location of the prison, you have to review also the location of the courts. Now, that is not to say that the land that is set apart or set aside for prisons is put into its highest and best use. In terms of public purpose, you cannot review it from an economics point only. You have also to look at the social purpose and the public purpose, because public purpose may not be just looked at commercially. Yes, it is true. All that land, we need to ask ourselves, as the public purpose ceased, or has to become less optimal. If you take the remand to far away places, then you have to find a way of transporting the prisoners to the courts. or you
Or you build a court.
You build a court that can be used as a temporary court next to the prison.
You make a temporary court. You have to look at where the lawyers are located and where the people who will be taken to those courts are coming from. So you may not take them too far away from the settlement.
Yes.
Now, what we need to be careful about is, as we change the public use, are we saying that this land will be converted to a more optimal public purpose, or are we saying this land will be converted to a more optimal private purpose? You know? So if we are saying we want to ease or release the land to make it available for investment, we have to ask ourselves, which investment?
Yeah.
All right? Which investment is this? And when we take it for investment, how will equity be ensured and integrity? So that this land, again, when we don't open it up just for grabbing, you know, we have to ask ourselves, as the public purpose is, then what will be the alternative? Where will the public purpose go? The next place where you will take this facility, for sure, you have to ask yourself, does government have an alternative parcel of land at that location? So that then you say government to government, you know, government exchanging land with another government agency.
Yeah.
Then it frees it up. Or is government going to acquire again? Will it go to purchase? So that if government is going to purchase, you have to look at what money will government pay, what money will government need to develop that other facility, and then weigh against improving or developing where the current location is. Yes. So that is the big question you have to do before you go now to the processes of relocating. And then the complementarity, how the other services that are connected to the prison, how they will be managed so that the other location you choose becomes also optimal in terms of complementarity with the other services connected to it, whether it is the police service, whether it is the judicial service, whether it is the services of advocates. You know, those are the parameters to look at. I do agree. If you look at the size of Nairobi and the planning reality, when those prisons were being set in those places, you know, those places looked very far. They were very far. They were not. No one was settled in those places. Yeah. Prison was set up in a committee. It was in the coffee farm and near coffee farm. Then the other one that is in Langata, again, it was very far away. So I think the industrial area one and the Nairobi West one were the ones that were near town and were looked at in terms of convenience of travel to the courts. So we need now to relook, because planning is dynamic. We can look at planning in a dynamic way, but we must not do this matter during a political season like now. Because the risk of during political season, many things happen. Even well-intended processes might end up very, very, very negatively implemented, and public land may end up being lost. So we have to review this in a systematic manner and employ these parameters so that we get a guided decision that leads us into a decision that releases land, yes, for optimality and for highest and best use, but then secures the public purpose in a manner that does not defeat the social services that are rendered.
When the city was being planned, if we're looking at Nairobi specifically, Doctor, when it was being planned, all these amenities that you talk about being in close proximity to one another, was that what was considered as the city was being planned? That, all right, we're going to have the courts, the prisons have to be in close proximity to the courts, whereby lawyers that are not too far in terms of where their practice is and then where the courts are. All of these were taken into consideration when planning the city?
Yes, they were. You look at Nairobi West and where the court is, and look at where the high court is at the city center. You look at industrial area, it's about 3 kilometers away from where the courts are. And you look at, these are the remand prisons. Then when you have been sentenced, you are taken to far off places, a little far off, like Langata was seen as far off. community was seen as far off, so that the ones who are serving, and then this large land was seen in terms of the prisoners will do farming there, they will do other activities, new productive activities. That's why they are the farm site.
Mm-hmm.
But then this is even the concept of imprisonment and the correctional services, the way they are managed, has seriously changed. People don't just farm, using a djembe and all that. People in prison engage in technical things, in innovations, in vocational issues. So even if you're designing a prison now, you design a very modern facility that takes care of even the realities in terms of technology. That's why I say accessibility may be improved a lot by the court system, depending on technology. If you automate most of the court activities, then the nearness of the service may have to be reconsidered. What we can look to very far may be near in terms of current technology. So these are the things you have to look at, but I agree that even the way the facilities are developed, it's not optimal. Even in themselves, even if you have to make the prison, maybe one of the parcels there can contain all those prisoners if the designs are properly done and in the most optimal manner.
Yeah.
A big number that we're looking at, 1,200 kilometers that
Acres.
committee, 1,200 acres, that committee sits on right now. If you were to look at that area now, what could be done with that big parcel of land that only very little is being optimized today? And then kind of gives credence or kind of gives some kind of merit to what the CS is saying, that how do we have all this land? Very little of it is being used. A lot of it is lying fallow. And we're talking about Nairobi that needs more in terms of infrastructure development, things that can be spread out a little bit. Is there not merit in that? Or how can it be used better?
Well, yeah. For instance, of course, we have this housing crisis that we have in the country, and you notice that we need to house the people living in the city, not just in terms of private rental houses and private owner-occupied houses, but we can have what we call government and social housing, and this can be converted into a housing project, but that is government-led, not just private. You notice like they did with the Ngara project. So that can be converted into that, but you have to look at the social dynamics of that housing project, because also you don't want to keep a living neighborhood where people are living and then you just put a prison right into the center. So you have to look at the dynamics. Those people who are in a correctional facility, where will you take them? Where will you have it so that then it is conducive for that purpose? And also, if you are releasing this land, then you have to design it to the most optimal manner, as I said, housing mixed to target the population that is there. But also, you have to be very, very, very careful that you also don't open it up to private individual grabbing. It has to be government-led. If that is the next public purpose that is seen by government, then it can be converted, but it has to be converted putting all those parameters into consideration, not just by an order, and just say we are taking away the prison and this land is available here. We have to get to know when it is available here, how complementary will it be made with the other uses, sustainable development fitting in there, and the social function of the prison is also not lost.
I think I hear you. And when you're talking right now, the government has this whole part of the Big Four agenda is affordable housing and ensuring that there's better access to housing. You've just talked about the projects that the government has rolled out in Ngara, in parts of Parklands and Pangani. If you can imagine, if the government actually took up this 1,200 acres of land, planned properly, and it's the one that led the development of a housing estate, with all the facilities, there's going to be a hospital nearby. They put up a hospital. There's going to be schools from kindergarten all the way to high school nearby that can serve the population that will then be moved here. It starts easing up the pressure of housing, helps to bring the cost of housing down because now there's serious access to proper housing, and it's not difficult for committee to move to another place, in my opinion. It's a facility that is restricted. It does not have access to other parts apart from those that are linked to the justice system. Courts are not only in Nairobi. Security, police services are countrywide. Then it's possible for you to actually put up a prison facility in another place. And then this frees up what you're seeing as great pressure with urbanization for housing and all the attendant facilities.
Well, I do agree with you that whatever development, if that land, then the public purpose is shifted to another place, and that is converted to that other purpose, you have to have an integrated development that takes care of this complete balance, the economic, the environmental aspect, and also the social side, where you have all those facilities that you're talking about, and an entire neighborhood that provides all the social and economic and physical needs of people. That would really help in easing the pressure in Nairobi, and for sure it would help in easing in reducing the deficit that is there now. It is the deficit that makes housing very expensive, because if 1,000 people are chasing one housing unit, 1,000 people, then the price will keep going up and up and up. But if you reduce that to 3 people looking for that house, or 2 people, then you can see the prices that will be there for purchase and for rental will be very, very, very stable and affordable. So that looking at the supply gap and filling it would really be a huge boost. But you have to know that this population will also need courts.
Yep.
And will need prisons not too far away. You may not take all the prisons to the one corner of the country. Again, you still need, because the population is big. So you have to ask what we do to minimize crime. Even in some countries, people have managed to minimize crime and promote the rule of law and order such that the prisons have been rendered almost irrelevant. You have no people to take there. So you can also work from that social side and the legal side and make sure you minimize the demand for prisons, and you minimize the demand for physical lockdown and imprisonment, where you don't just take people with petty crimes and all those others and put them in prison and remove them from the productive system. So you can convert and re-engineer this system also, so that you don't take lands, which is our prime resource, and just keep it for prison. So that whatever land is available for prison is minimal, and these other correctional measures and social order management measures are improved, so that we reduce the number of people going into prison.
Having a conversation with Dr. Mwenda Makathimo. He's a land governance expert, talking about easing the pressure that is Nairobi, that's been growing. A proposal by the Cabinet Secretary for the Interior just the other day, maybe just said it off the cuff. I'm looking at the land that we have here. Committee, 1,200 acres. Langata women, 50 acres. If we moved them out of Nairobi and took them to another place, maybe not so far from Nairobi, you could then free up pieces of land here that can be used for other social amenities. And that's why we're having the Daktari with us and having this conversation with him. +9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, broadcasting on Spice FM and online, Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We're having a conversation about optimal and best use of land, especially in Nairobi. How best can we decongest Nairobi? People have even talked about, how about we create a new city? South Africa, they created a new city next to Johannesburg. They called it Sandton. It's a completely new city, about, 40-something years old now. It's a brand new city.
Sure.
Can you move Nairobi into a new place and build new Nairobi, like New Delhi?
Look, these things are possible, and maybe Dr. can talk, because if we give an example of Sandton in South Africa, we also have the example of Abuja in Nigeria. Abuja did not exist 35 years ago. It was the middle of the city, the middle of the country, and Lagos was the commercial and government capital. And then the government saw this is absolute madness, it cannot continue. Demarcate a certain part of the country, and we say, okay, we're moving everything up north. The entire center of the country moved, everything, courts, federal government, the central banking system, everything moved to Abuja. So we've seen that things like this are possible, right?
And a new city develops.
New city develops. It's very young.
And then now you're planning from scratch. You have the ample time to do proper planning.
Right.
Put in the proper infrastructure. Put in the proper thinking ahead. Because right now, we were talking to Major General Badi, and he was telling us the sewer infrastructure in Nairobi right now can't hold. The water infrastructure in Nairobi right now, we need to do a lot more to basically expand and cater for the people. We have the conversation with Dr. Mwenda Makathimo. He is a land governance expert. As we wait for your calls, Jimmy is calling in from Malindi. Jimmy, good morning.
Good morning, too. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Fine, thank you. Okay, going straight to the point,
Yes.
because due to time, I can say the only way, there are very many ways we can discongest Nairobi, the capital city. Just like example what you have given, I had in mind just the same. But let me just insist on that. Look, how many cities, first we ask ourselves, how many cities do we have in Kenya? There is Mombasa, there is Eldoret,
Yep.
there is Nairobi.
Yep. Kisumu as
Lamu is coming, Isiolo is coming. So the only way, it is by being patriotic, feeling that there is an urge for also these other cities to get some specific facilities. Like, what am I trying to say? What our Matiang'i is saying about shifting Kamiti prison. I read it in Twitter. It was proposing Bomet or Kitale, something like that. I can't remember very well.
Yes, it was.
But now look, is the government not capable of constructing another prison in Kitale and Bomet?
It is.
No.
They're
Obviously, yes, it is. They can. They can construct it because they're saying about shifting.
Yep.
It means they will construct others.
Yep.
So what is the main point here? The main point here is that land that committee is holding, that is what is being targeted. So who is targeting that land? Who is coming to do development on that land? Why is that land being targeted? Who are the investors that are going to invest on that land? Is it going to be invested by people privately, or is it going to be a government project?
Right.
What is that project that the government wants to do on such a big land like that, that it cannot do in other places in this country? Is it a private investor? Because the government
Jimmy,
is the one that is going to allocate.
when you hear this, Jimmy, you sense some commercial interest driving the conversation.
That is the point. And because the government is the one that shows the investors where they will do the investment from. Okay. Who are these investors? Are these the Chinese? Are these the Kenyans? Or who are they? So this is the point.
We hear you. We hear you.
Matiang'i should know that Kenyans are not stupid. And this is very direct because he is a citizen like me. And what I've come to realize is that we have to talk and talk like people. Gentlemen talk. You know, with the truth. Let us come clear. Mombasa has got a very big area here where whatever they want to do in Kamiti there, they can do it here. Isiolo, Lamu, there are very many other places. We cannot say that we are making Nairobi a super city, and we are saying that we are patriotic, and we are not seeing other people and other places which need the same place, the same development that is going to create employment.
We hear you, Jimmy. Thank you very much. Let's hear from Mike in Kisumu. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
How are you?
I'm fine. How is Ndu doing?
Ndu is well. Good morning, Mike.
I want to start by saying,
Yep.
I really, Siti Muga was in the studio when you're discussing the African leader who is admitted in the hospital, so that I can just get some words of wisdom from him. Secondly, this issue of relocation. I don't see a problem per se about what the CS is proposing. Because again, if you look at the major cities around the world, you'll find that most of them, such kind of institutions are outside the outskirts of the city, so that the city is fully used for infrastructural purposes. Secondly, look at the piece of land. For example, Kamiti is holding 1,000 acres, which not all of it is being utilized. Only a portion, and that is why the CS is coming clean and saying, okay, we can utilize this land since it's in the capital city. Remember, Nairobi is the gateway to Eastern and Central Africa.
Right.
Most of Eastern Africa. And you can't force an investor, like now Nairobi is full. You can go and invest in Mombasa or elsewhere.
Yeah.
An investor will invest where he feels that it's what his heart wants to invest. And so if he feels, I want to invest in the gateway of Eastern Africa, then that is why he feels that his investment is going to do well.
And that's the best place.
You can just try talking to him like, we also have other options where you can explore, but if this is what you want, then again, we cannot force you to go elsewhere.
We hear you, Mike. Thank you very much. 0719-012-600. How can Nairobi be decongested? Dr. Makathimo, you've heard the two callers. What would you say to that?
Well, I agree that with Jimmy, Kenya has a history of how public land has been managed before.
Yep.
And you rightly said in the beginning that part of Langata land, prison land, has been grabbed, and many other prison lands that have been set aside, or even public lands, have been grabbed irregularly, and also sometimes you have to be very, very, very careful that when you have a suggestion like this, that the accountability measures are beyond reproach. That there is no commercial interest, private interest that is disguised in the name of highest and best use that is seeking to take this land, private people to benefit and, grab in that manner. So even if we say the public purpose may have been overtaken as of now, not entirely, but may not be the most optimal in the prisons now, and then you refer that public purpose. But if you decide to convert, then that conversion must, of essence, become one that is very transparent, one that is highly competitive, and one where there is very open public participation, so that then questions of integrity are addressed in the most satisfactory manner. So that's the elephant in the room with regard to that. You talked about the Nairobi National Park. That's when I said highest and best use doesn't mean in terms of only economic value.
Yeah.
The Nairobi National Park has immense ecological value that cannot be equated to any concrete that would go there. It also has serious cultural value that is unique to this country in terms of tourist attraction and all that, and in terms of balancing the ecosystem and cleaning the air that is polluted from the industrial area and all this traffic. And then the only open space that we have that is large enough in this country, green open space, is that park. So that environmental value must be safeguarded whatever the cost. The few open places we have, Uhuru Park and the rest, they may not look viable commercially, but if you look at them in terms of ecological value, environmental and social value, then you see the value. All these housing estates we say we want to create, we must create recreational places for these people.
Yep.
We must create green spaces. Even that 1,200 acres must have sufficient green spaces. At least 10% of it must go into green open spaces. So that's why I said, if it is being opened, it must be opened for optimal, highest and best planning, balancing the environmental and the social and the ecological values. So that has to be safeguarded so that we don't just open a concrete. I also agree that decongesting Nairobi, the congestion we find in Nairobi is because of the rural-urban migration, intense rural-urban migration, because the employment opportunities are mostly found in Nairobi, and most of the industries and the productive enterprise are found in Nairobi. So that issue of decentralization, devolution, and growing other cities, alternative cities, like Isiolo was proposed in the Vision 2030.
Yep.
If we continue continued with that plan of Isiolo and not leaving it midway, then you would find opportunities that are availed by Isiolo, then would help us to decongest. If you got the other hubs, the Lamu and the Kisumu and the Eldoret and the Nakuru being promoted as was envisioned, then you would make the migration into Nairobi be arrested. Right. So that what you are doing now is the people will stay in Nairobi. But I'm telling you, because of the what we call agglomeration economy, or enterprise and activities coming together, they bring in advantages that keep adding growth. The agglomeration economies created by Nairobi as of now will continue.
Yeah.
Because people are there, they will continue for a long time. If you build another center, you may take a lot of time to attain what Nairobi has naturally.
Yeah.
So you can write on what Nairobi has, and we should not lose that because we want to build Isiolo. Isiolo is long. These others are long term. They can be built as we continue.
As we continue in Nairobi.
People who are already in Nairobi can continue suffering until we build a new city. No.
Let's go back to the phone lines.
That's the kind of thing we should have. And I like the metropolitan strategy, the metropolitan growth strategy, and plan within the metropolitan so that you combine Kajiado, Machakos, Thika, and Nairobi and Kiambu. In that manner, that will also help us make this more viable and optimize the value that is already created by Nairobi.
Going back to the phone lines, Fred in Nairobi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today, Fred?
Fine, thank you. Just wanted to comment something on this topic about land.
Yes.
Because I've had the privilege of staying out of this country. And I believe land economics is the gateway to opening up this country and moving from the politics that we have in the country. Because last year during the COVID, I stayed in the U.S. I was locked there for some time. And I happened to have toured a little bit of the countryside. And what I can say is every corner that you go, you'd find a small industry, whether it's a first generation, second generation. So as we are opening up the infrastructure, we also need to converse about the issue of land economics so that we are able to move out the concentration of, as you say, the big four. They are talking about industrial build-up of the industrial economies. This should be taken out of Nairobi. And I believe the issue of moving the prison out of Nairobi should be guided in a very structured manner because, as the expert was saying, it's driven by many things. But I've seen maximum prisons where they are taken out maybe somewhere deep in the desert. So I think as we converse about the issue of land, we need to look at it from a bigger perspective. Even at this moment where we are talking about it's a constitutional moment because land economics has the power to turn around the economics of our country. I think that's what I just wanted to comment as we talk about land economics.
Thank you for calling in, Fred. Lydia, good morning. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello, good
Lydia.
morning.
Oh, good morning. This is Lydia
Yes.
from Nairobi. I wanted to say, these are my thoughts and my words. If your clothes are torn, it is okay. If you don't have any money in your pocket, it is okay. But to stay alive, you must have water to drink, eat the food grown around you, and have a place to sleep. You have all the water to drink, the food, the chicken, eggs, and whatever.